And those options look very interesting for the preferreds, because I think that's just going to bring more participants to the ecosystem. Now you have ways to have covered calls on your preferreds, and also have those cash secured puts. I think those are especially interesting for institutional that want an additional insurance on top of having everything backed by Bitcoin.
Are you all in on the chair? How many chairs are you sitting on right now?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to One Chair. As a reminder, none of what you will hear is financial advice, and this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. So today we want to start with some MSTR news, and first with some calculations that came from Josh Mann, specifically on the STRC IPO that was done, and where he kind of lays out the math that this IPO was actually dilutive to the MSTR shareholder. And looking at his math, basically what he's saying is that since STRC was sold to early investors at $90, but the liquidation preference on those instruments is $100, this gap is actually additional risk that is taken by the common stockholder, because what happens is he can buy Bitcoin for $90 worth, but he has an obligation of $100 in case of a liquidation event, right? So that's kind of his point here, is that again, this was a dilutive operations at the end of the day for MSTR shareholders, and that's why it's bearish. And he sold all of his MSTR stock a while ago, and this is one of the reasons why he's explaining. So, but at the same time, in his post, he says that if Bitcoin goes up to 200,000 or higher, that it will be a very lucrative leverage trade that they did. So, and that's kind of the point, right? And this is kind of what we have been saying on this podcast for a while, is that if Bitcoin crashes significantly from here and stays down, and for that reason MSTR would go bankrupt, then the preferred shareholders would get their money before the common shareholders, and that's why these operations then in retrospect would look really bad. But since you're buying MSTR because you think Bitcoin goes up over time, at the end of the day, I don't think it really matters, this theoretical calculation of dilution in case of a bankruptcy. I don't know what are your thoughts on this, Eve?
Yeah, I think that the calculation, looking it like without the context, makes sense. So I can agree with Josh on this one. But then if you look at the full picture, then I think you look at, for example, even the other preferreds were also sold initially at a discount, right? So you could argue the same for the other preferreds. That's first of all, but obviously the amounts were smaller back in the day when they were IPO'd. In the meantime, they've increased in price, or at least STRF and STRK are above their notional value. So that's good when they do the ATM. STRD is still lagging behind. And if you also have a look at the way that they wanted to initialize STRC, you have to look at the amount that they brought in, like 2.5 billion. That's not nothing. I think for the deal to have such a big deal, then you had to have a discount, and all of this needs to be done in a way that bootstraps the whole system, right? Because you can't just have a very small IPO and then expect to have an ATM on a few million or less than a million. Then that doesn't really make sense either. So I think that the discount is justified if you look at the broader picture, and obviously the calculation again makes sense if you look at specifically the dilutive aspect of the IPO. But looking forward, and again, I think we're all here because we understand Bitcoin and we know Bitcoin is going to be the future of money, and therefore having it sold at 2.5 billion instead of 2.8 billion, I think we're still fine. As at least I'm looking at it from a MSTR shareholder perspective.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right, and they will issue in the future. They will issue those preferreds at par value, especially STRC, which should be stable at around 100, and they don't issue shares below 100 anyway. So the dilution would not happen anymore. It was just to bootstrap to get some liquidity into the system. For the other preferreds, however, it's an interesting thought to keep in mind that if they issue the ATM on the other preferreds below the liquidation value, then it's theoretically it's dilutive for the common shareholders. If it's above, then not. Then it's actually accretive again. So.
Yeah, I mean, you can also see it both sides, right? Because if at the time where the preferreds are trading below par, but then Bitcoin has an interesting buying opportunity, let's say it goes back to 50K or 60K, then you might consider selling them at below par because you know that most likely this is I don't know, maybe there's a small black swan event or something, and then there's going to be a quick recovery. Then in these cases, I think it does make sense. So again, I think you need to always have a look at the context and not just look at the pure numbers, because obviously you can get lost in the numbers, but then they don't mean anything without the full story. All right, I think that we've covered now the topic on this post from George Mandel, which was interesting. I think it's an interesting thought experiment, but again, I think it's yeah. When you expose something like this, you should also put all the parts of the story as well. And so yeah, let's move on to our next topic that we want to discuss, and those are the new options on the preferreds on MSTR. And yeah, I was caught by surprise, but I thought that was super interesting. I think there is some really interesting derivative paper Bitcoin fall that's gonna come now after Bitcoin paper summer. And yeah, those options look very interesting for the preferreds, because I think that's just going to bring more participants to the ecosystem. Now you have ways to have covered calls on your preferreds, and also have those cash secured puts. I think those are especially interesting for institutional that want an additional insurance on top of having everything backed by Bitcoin. As a retail, I think that's and especially a retail that understands Bitcoin and believes in Bitcoin. I think that's an overkill, but I think for institutionals, that's going to be super interesting for them to have such a derivative to add to the preferreds.
Yeah, and what will happen most likely if those strategies are being executed, covered calls or cash secured puts, this at the end of the day creates more demand for the underlying for STRC. So the options should also be good to get more demand for all of the preferreds. So that was a good move to introduce options here.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how those evolve. Obviously, right now it's only the beginning, so I think the traction is rather low on these ones. But once they start increasing in volume, then we should see probably a lot of participants entering also the markets on the preferreds for MSTR.
Yeah, and for STRC specifically is still lagging a bit, or it's flat since they increased the dividends on by 1 full percentage point. It's still flat and not reaching the levels of 99 to 101 that they target. So we'll have to see when and if it gets there, or if they have to raise the interest rates again.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting point. Yeah, that I was expecting the price to rally a bit more than that after the increase, but it looks like nothing has happened. It's really flat. I mean, we're still around that 97, 98 range, and yeah, let's see also with I think it's next week we'll have the September FOMC meeting where they're going to decide on the rates as well, and maybe that boosts a little bit more if there is a rate cut, obviously, STRC. But yeah, I was expecting the dividend to actually already do that a little bit, and nothing has happened.
And what we never talked about, but the plays around the dividend payment dates, right? Because you need to hold the share on the shares on the 15th of the month to get the monthly dividend payment at the end of the month. And what happens in regular equity is usually the day of the the cutoff date for the dividend payments, usually the day after the stock goes down by the amount of the dividend that is paid out, right? And on STRC, we saw it also go down after the cutoff date, but it went down a lot more than the dividend rate. It went down 4 times more. So will be interesting to watch as well on the 15th of the month or on the 16th what happens to the price.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping to see a stable price on Bitcoin, because I think last time was because also we had a very negative sentiment on Bitcoin as the price was falling as well. So obviously, yeah, would be nice to have a flat Bitcoin, so we know exactly what's going on as well on the STRC side of things with their dividends and how it interacts with all of that. Great. So let's move to our next best Bitcoin treasury, Metaplanet. So Metaplanet, I think there's a lot of interesting topics going on. Let's start with their recent raise with their international investors. So they're going to be issuing 385 million shares at an issue price of 553 Japanese yen per share. However, the amount to be paid is 533.39 Japanese yen per share. And this amounts to a total of 205 and change billion Japanese yen, which is more or less equivalent to 1.4 billion US dollars. And if you start making these calculations, we see that more or less based on the price of Bitcoin, that's an additional 12,500 Bitcoin, more or less, that they will be purchasing over the next days and weeks. Yeah, to be honest, I wasn't so happy with the way that the whole issuance or the deal was made, because as we saw, the price of Metaplanet has been hammered down, probably by the same hedge funds or investors that are trying to, or that were doing the deal. And in my opinion, the share price is way too low compared to what the original deal would have been if the price was obviously higher. But yeah, maybe I'll stop here, and Quentin, you already have some thoughts about it.
Yeah, originally when the deal was announced, Metaplanet was over 800, closer to 900 per share, and now the deal was made at the end at 533. So yeah, we don't know for sure, but probably those big institutional players have put downward pressure on the stock to get a better deal. And on top of that, I mean, at the absolute bottom, they still got a 10% discount on top of that for the deal to close. So they got a super good entry, and at the detriment of the retail shareholders at the end. So from that perspective, it's not very good, and also quite dilutive. It's still accretive because they're over 1 MNAV, but it's not that much over 1 now. With the share price at market value was around 1.5, I think, at the bottom, and they got a 10% discount on that. So there's not a lot of accretion at the end of the day. but still raising 1.4 billion for a company that has a market cap under 4 billion is quite an achievement, and they will increase their Bitcoin holdings by around 60% if they get to buy in this Bitcoin range now. So at the end, it is still increasing their stack heavily, but yeah, the share price has suffered from that, and I don't know if what the reason was to get this deal done now. Do they expect Bitcoin to be a lot higher later, and they want to get this done as soon as possible, or is it possibly because of the preferreds that they want to issue? And then it would be understandable, because the more Bitcoin they hold, the more liquidity they can probably generate on their preferreds, and add additional Bitcoin to the balance sheet. So yeah, there's not a lot of companies that can work with preferred strategy. Obviously, the front runner, but then companies like AltBG and Smarter Web and those they're still too small to be offering preferred. So yeah, Metaplanet is the only one next in line that can achieve it now. So maybe that was the reason for this deal at the end.
Yeah, no, that's I think some good thoughts, and I do believe there's a reason they wanted to do and to get this deal done rather quickly. Up until now, we haven't heard much from Dylan and Simon, because there is a blackout period, so that ends on the 17th of September. So in about 6 days, we should hear from them again, and I would love to hear about their thoughts on the deal as well, because I'm pretty sure they might not be as happy as initially thought, but the market does like those tricks to you, and I'm not surprised that it happened the way it did. At the end of the day, we're bound by TradFi tricks here. Overall positive, but I think we need to figure out, or at least when the Bitcoin Treasury companies do these deals, they need to find a better way to do these deals, right? Because we also have the same issue with the pipe deals that we've seen, right? The investors are not aligned with the long vision of the company. They dump on whoever's holding the stocks. I mean, Sequence got completely trashed. And the same, I think, happened a little bit with the other ones. With Naka, I think, also suffered some quite heavy losses over a few days when the shares from the pipe were not blocked anymore. So yeah, and all of this is I think a bit linked to the rules of the market, how they're played, right?
Yeah, and now that the deal is closed, yeah, let's see how the share price evolves. The day after it closed, it jumped significantly. We had a 20% uptick in Metaplanet, but the day after it crashed again. So let's see how this continues, and if the short pressure continues to increase or not. You have an interesting tweet here that you found on the short pressure on Metaplanet, right?
Yeah, there's an interesting. Actually, he's posted a couple of tweets. So Mark Reamer, M Reamer, on X. Make sure to follow him if you're following Metaplanet, because he's actually posting some interesting charts on the short interest on Metaplanet. And the chart that he posted here shows that there's currently at least a reported short interest of 10%. And it looks like there's even an estimated total short interest of closer to 25, or even as of today, even above 25%. So the shorts are clearly piling on to Metaplanet, and even with the deal done, looks like they're continuing their hammering of the stock. So it's going to be interesting to see if Bitcoin starts moving up. I mean, the short squeeze on Metaplanet will happen sooner or later, and this clearly shows that there is way too much shorting on the stock, and it's clearly undervalued. All right, let's move to our next topic, and we're gonna now talk about a company we haven't talked about in a little while, Semler Scientific. So they had their shareholder meeting last week on the 5th of September. This obviously got overlooked with the whole MSTR inclusion in the S&P 500 theater. And yeah, there wasn't a lot of talk about it. And even on X, there hasn't been a lot of communication from anybody from the Semler Scientific team, which is a bit curious. So I don't know if they also have some sort of blackout, but even in the website, I couldn't find much about the shareholder meeting, and because they had also some interesting items to be approved. And among those two items that I find very interesting were the addition of 160 million common shares and the approval for 42 million preferred shares. So the first one got approved, so the additional common shares got approved. However, through through different sources that I looked up, apparently the 42 million preferred shares were not approved during the shareholder meeting. So that's, I would say, rather bad news for Semler in some aspect, because they cannot follow the MSTR or the Metaplanet now strategies in terms of the preferreds. So they're bound to their common shares ATM and continuing to do converts right now.
Yeah, and their MNAV is quite depressed too. It's under 1 currently, so they don't have any possibilities to issue shares to buy more Bitcoin. And at this point, without preferreds, probably their only chance is to get bonds or money from their operating business. And yeah, so not in a very good spot currently. And I think it would be good to get some communications from the Semler team on what this means with the preferreds being rejected, and will they issue a new proposal, or what was the reason for this rejection? It's been very quiet over the last weeks on Semler, so not sure what to make of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would also love some communication. I hope that the team will come up with something soon, because it's already been almost 1 week. But yeah, I guess we will figure out that soon enough. Great. So let's move to our last topic for today. And here again, talking about Strive, where they finally completed their merger. I believe that was a few days ago now. And that's great, because that means they can finally launch operations. And that also means that there's $1.5 billion that is coming into the space right from the start. So I think there's going to be some interesting communication from Strive in the coming days or weeks on their Bitcoin accumulation. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to see Strive in action, especially on their alpha strategy side. And I think we haven't mentioned this in this podcast, but the alpha strategies for Strive is that they're going to be looking to acquire some companies that have stranded capital. And I believe that's something that is quite widespread I think in some of the biotech and in the medical companies, because just the way that they operate. And they should be able to buy those companies at, I don't know, let's say 90 or 80 cents on the dollar. And by doing so, they would get all their stranded cash that they have, or stranded capital, whether it be also maybe treasuries or whatever they have in their treasury, and acquire Bitcoin through that. So they would be able to get basically for each Bitcoin buying again 90 cents on the dollar or 80 cents on the dollar, and yeah, just keep on accumulating that way. So looking forward to that. Great. So I think we talked about all the topics quite a lot again this week. So maybe let's just have a quick round on final thoughts.
Yeah, so from my end, I think it's always good to ask yourself again, what is the main differentiating factor of a Bitcoin treasury company before you start investing in it. We've discussed that in the past, but I think it becomes more and more relevant because you see the companies that don't really have a USP, that they have been crashing and heavier than all the others, and are below 1 MNAV now. And if they cannot get out of that, then they will probably not last very long. And I think there's some clear winners, or some with a very clear strategy, like a Metaplanet on the Japanese market, for example, pretty clear. And you need to find the right ones in the right niches, and not everyone will be making it and will be able to differentiate themselves. So it's important to stay on top of that, and be critical as well of those companies.
Yeah, no, that's greatly said. From my end, I think one thing that I pick up from this week is that basically the Bitcoin treasury companies are still at the whim, to some extent, of TradFi, unfortunately. I really hope that we see, or that the investors that are now entering the market at least realize that these aren't trading vehicles, but it's something that you should hold for at least 4 to 5 years, or even longer, right? Because they're stacking this asset Bitcoin, which is these pristine assets, improving and also increasing on fiat terms. I hope we see the next phase of the Bitcoin treasuries rising from this, because it's a bit tough, especially knowing what the asset is, Bitcoin behind it, and looking at the prices of these companies. But I think we will already find a little taste of this in Q4, especially with, again, all the events and capital that will come into the market.
And we're starting to see a turnaround. I think, Bitcoin is still ranging between 110 and 120. So not much happening there. But on the Bitcoin treasury companies, it looks like a bottom has been forming, and some already bouncing back quite a bit with Smarter Web and OutBG, Metaplanet. We'll see, but it looks like not going only one direction anymore, at least.
It cannot go down forever, for sure. All right, then thanks for listening. See you on the next one.
Bye-bye, everybody. See you next time.
How many chairs are you sitting on right now?